Let's get anybody I want with this gallery.
You're in charge.
Say that because I was sitting next to you.
Good morning. Welcome, everybody. We got a few online as well.
Yeah.
This is the Thursday, April 18th, 2024 OLCC Commission meeting. For opening now, would you take roll, please?
Yes. Commissioner Chowry.
Here.
Commissioner Curran.
Here.
Commissioner Floyd.
Here.
Commissioner Glenn.
Here.
Commissioner Japon Porter. Commissioner Hayes. Commissioner Miletus.
Here.
Commissioner Warren.
Here.
And Chair Doherty.
Here.
We'll make sure that Commissioner Hayes may be in the list of folks and we may need to just give her access to her.
Here yet.
She's here.
Looks like she's, is she on there?
I don't see you yet.
Okay. So first item on the agenda is the approval of the March 21st, 2024 commission meeting minutes. Any discussion on those?
Chair,
Commissioner,
I move to approve the March 21st, 2024 commission meeting minutes as written. Second.
moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Laura, will you take the roll, please?
Commissioner Chowry.
Here.
Commissioner Curran.
Yeah.
Commissioner Floyd.
Yes.
Commissioner Glenn.
Yes.
Commissioner Japon Porter.
Yeah.
Commissioner Miletus.
Yes.
Commissioner Warren.
Yes.
Chair Doherty.
Yes. That's taking a lot longer than it used to.
We need more people.
Oh, that's it. Okay. So we have with us this morning the people from OBRC, our bottle bill. We're going to make a presentation. Eric and Jim, is that it?
Yes.
Good morning. Thank you for coming in. We appreciate it. We need an education on the bottle bill and what you guys do and how it all works. Lots of new commissioners. And I need to know as well.
That's not the right one, is it?
There it is. Okay. Good morning, Chair Doherty and Commissioners. For the record, my name is Jim Huglet. I'm the Program Manager for Bottle Bill here at OLCC. And I'm here today with Eric Chambers from the Oregon Beverage Recycling Cooperative. Eric is the Vice President of Strategy and Outreach. And we each have a presentation that we'll cover with you today. And we appreciate the invitation to share some bottle bill insights with you. And with that, I will start. Is that in presentation mode?
It is not yet. One moment. Do out of this. Oh, I can advance it manually for now, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. So history and overview of the program. In 1971, Oregon leads by enacting the nation's first ever bottle bill with a goal to reduce litter and clean up Oregon's beaches, highways and rivers, other public areas. OLCC was assigned as the administrator, and we do that through a training, education, and partnership approach. And liquor touches some Oregonians, cannabis touches some Oregonians, but the bottle bill touches nearly every Oregonian. In 1971, the initial products that were covered were beer and soda. Program expanded to add water in 2009. In 2017, the redemption value increased from a nickel to a dime. And then in 2018, it was expanded to include most beverages. There's some excluded containers like milk, infant formula, spirits, wine. This is a graphic on how the system works. So if you look there in the middle at the distributor, that's where the dime is originated. It's then passed along to the retailer and to the consumer. And then it's refunded by the retailer and ultimately paid back by the distributor. So if the container completes the circle, it's a closed loop. And any unredeemed containers, those deposits stay with the distributor. And then the processed recycled material is sold to the end markets. On this chart, we go back to 2012 and look at the redemption rate in Oregon. You can see they were in the 70s and then dipped down into the 60s. And then when we increased from a nickel to a dime in Admiral's containers, we are up in the 80s with the exception of the 2020 pandemic. Little blip there. And the preliminary redemption rate for 2023 is coming in at 90%, which is the highest it's ever been in Oregon and the highest in the nation. And something that takes a lot of time, effort, and energy, and something to be proud of. So there are some recent and ongoing challenges. Recently, the Tri-Government Emergency Response to Fentanyl implemented a narrowly scoped individual container return pause on 2 downtown retail locations, which is a Safeway on 12th and Jefferson and the nearby Plaid Pantry. And that effort is coordinated with the governor's office and the Unified Central Command. It began in March, it was extended through April, and will be evaluated to either expire, expand, or extend. And many other retailers have reached out with similar concerns requesting the same exception. They're citing unruly or intoxicated return customers, instances of violence towards staff, safety concern around needles, fentanyl foil, and other contaminants, And we've also, on the flip side, heard from many individual container return folks that are unhappy with the reduced access and the retailer compliance. So as the bottle bill staff administering, we sort of referee some of that. And the bottle bill laws are set in statute mostly and require legislative change. Also, out-of-state container returns has likely been an issue since inception, but with the move from a nickel to a dime has increased some. It was identified and called out specifically in the Secretary of State audit that was done in November of 2020 as a significant problem to the system. Basically, if the deposit's never paid into Oregon system, there's a financial loss when one's paid out. And the bottle bill does have a return with intent to defraud provision that makes out-of-state containers illegal. And the purpose is to target fraud at scale, not to discourage a person from picking up a container off the side of the road. And recent legislation that impacts bottle bill, Senate Bill 1520 was passed in 2022 and requires distributors to join a distributor cooperative or pay an annual fee to OLCC. The first phase was for large distributors that distributed 500,000 or more containers, and they had this requirement go into effect January 1, 2023. And all those folks have moved into compliance. And the second phase was for mid-size and small distributors, and they had a January 1, 2024 deadline to complete that. And it also requires OBRC to produce an annual network access report to the legislature, which they've done since the bill was passed, and it highlights some program details. It's a good report out. And it requires retailers to post the official OLCC notice that describes the return requirements. And that's a great training tool for return customers and for employees in the bottle rooms. And it adds canned wine effective July 1, 2025. Senate Bill 582 was passed, and it's not directly tied to OLCC, but could have an impact. So I'll talk about it. And that's the Plastic Pollution and Recycling Modernization Act, commonly referred to as the RMA, and it's administered by DEQ. And those program changes will start in July of 25. And it requires producers and manufacturers of packaged items. They'll have extended producer responsibility. And they'll be required to join a producer responsibility organization. So that includes glass manufacturers such as wine and spirits, which is how it could have an OLCC impact. And there's a legislative work group that has convened to discuss the inclusion of spirits and wine potentially in Oregon's bottle bill. Those discussions and meetings are ongoing. And so 53 years into Oregon's bottle bill, it has evolved over time. It will continue to evolve. And we're still committed to educating the public and industry, partnering with OBRC and grocers, and providing leadership and education to improve the bottle bill. And that concludes my slide deck, and Eric, yes, thank you.
Chair,
Commissioner?
so thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome.
presentation. So I was focused on the fact that she stated something so positive as the bottle bill. I'm wondering if there's anything that can be or has been done to address the increased violence concerns. That seems like a pretty big deal.
It is, and Chair Doherty, Commissioner Chong Porter, the step that was taken for the pause is one way to address that and evaluate what's happening in the area of the narrowly scoped pause. So the Unified Central Command is, has sort of eyes on that area, and the Oregon Beverage Recycling Cooperative is providing some data to see what the shift, where the shift has gone and what that looks like. So that's being evaluated with the governor's office, and then, we'll decide to either expire the pause, expand it, or extend it.
And there's some, also, the governor's office has put more police forces down in those areas to see what's the better impact, and both of those are being studied at this time to see how we can address the deal, because it is a very successful program. And this was not foreseen, of course, when Bottle Bill started up. So
Yeah.
Chair Doherty, Commissioners, Eric Chambers. I'm the Vice President of Strategy and Outreach at the Oregon Beverage Recycling Cooperative. I have a presentation here I'll go through kind of quickly, but it gives a little bit of a background on how the system has evolved over time and kind of who we are and the role that we play in the Bottle Bill.
and take your time. And
All right, okay, well then I won't go too quickly. I don't think this is advancing.
Is it working?
No, I don't think so.
Well, if not, I can,
Let's see if I can.
how's that?
It's gonna work.
Now it's
That's
working.
great, yeah, thank you. This is a quick timeline of the Bottle Bill. The first thing you'll notice here is that it's not drawn to scale in any way, shape, or form. As Jim mentioned, Oregon adopted the first bottle bill in the nation in 1971. Since then, 9 other states have adopted bottle bills. 9 of the 10 top recycling states in the United States all have one thing in common, which is that they have an Oregon-style bottle bill on the books. It makes a big difference in moving the needle. We'll talk a little bit about that. For the first 40 years or so of the bottle bill, not much was happening from a policy perspective. The underlying bottle bill requires that retailers receive empty containers back and at the time pay consumers a nickel at the point of sale. And then it requires beverage distributors individually to go to each of the retail stores that they service and pick up the containers of just their type and brand and reimburse the retailer for the refund that they paid to the consumer. And so that's sort of how it operated in the early years. But it didn't take long for the beverage distributors to realize that they're, fighting tooth and nail for those end caps and shelf space within the store, but that they share in this back end stewardship responsibility under the bottle bill. And I'm from Toledo, so I always use my hometown as an example, but you can think about this like the Pepsi distributor in Toledo talking to the Coke distributor and saying, I'm going to be at JC Market on Monday. Why don't I pick up both of our containers? You're going to be there on Thursday. You can do the same. We'll each save a trip, and then we'll figure out the fund accounting on the refund on the back end. And that made a lot of operational sense and efficiency sense. It also really helped the dealers, the grocers in this situation, because they no longer had to sort by brand in the back of the store. They could just sort by material type. So that type of cooperation from the beginning made a big difference for the entire system. Those cooperative relationships evolved over time, first regionally. So you can think about this as, a Eugene co-op and a Portland co-op, a Southern Oregon co-op and a Central Oregon co-op that were comprised of beverage distributors in those individual markets who were working together to operate this kind of back end piece. And then not shown on this, but in 2007, effective in 2009, the legislature added bottled water to the bottle bill. There were so many types and brands of bottled water, it became very difficult to try to identify who's distributing exactly what and how the refund flows for that. And so that sort of necessitated this statewide consolidation of these regional distributor cooperatives into the Oregon Beverage Recycling Co-op. So we're now a statewide cooperative that operates on behalf of nearly every beverage distributor in Oregon. providing the back-end logistics. It's a big operation. We have 530 employees across Oregon, doing everything from processing beverage containers to running a route operation to pick them up from our redemption centers and our retail partners. After OVRC formed, that really unlocked a lot of consumer conveniences in the system. Before that point, things like redemption centers didn't work well because trying to track the flow of the deposit was really difficult. If a container came up from Medford and was returned in Portland, then there was no way to tell that that was happening. And so the Medford distributor would have been holding the refund for that, but the Portland distributor is paying it out. When consolidation occurred, that facilitated things like modern redemption centers and the Green Bag program, which we'll talk a little bit about today, but has been a very popular and convenient return option for consumers. As Jim mentioned, in 2017, the refund value went from a nickel to a dime. 2018, container expansion occurred. And then in 2020, the dealer redemption center program started. That's when you drop your bags off at a retail store, at Fred Meyer, Safeway, Albertsons, New Seasons, all sorts of retailers have entered this program. That's the dealer redemption center program. I'll talk a little bit about how that works as well. The two motivating factors in the bottle bill that make it successful or not are consumer access. How easy is it for consumers to return containers and receive their refund back? And how financially motivating is it for them to do so? And Oregon leads the nation in both. At a dime, we have the highest uniform refund value in the United States. And we probably have more consumer access points per capita than any bottle bill system in existence. When you add things like the Green Bag program to that, you sort of get to even greater lengths of consumer convenience. And those two factors combine to create the results that we see on the back end, like Jim mentioned. And we'll talk a little bit about where we stack up in that as well.
Excuse me, what's you say the Green Bag program?
Yeah. So I have a couple slides on it.
Okay, go ahead.
All right, I'll do it. Yeah. As Jim mentioned, also in 1971, it was just beer and soda, or as we call it in Oregon, pop. Today, it includes everything, including your favorite kombucha. I think 88% of beverages sold in Oregon are in the bottle bill, which is towards the top of the stack nationally. High level look at the co-op. I mentioned we're a big operation. We operate with a $60.2 million annual budget. We process 2.09 billion containers a year. The last couple of years have been the first years in Oregon that we've crested the 2 billion mark. I have here an annual redemption rate of 85.5%. That was our official 2022 number. Our preliminary 2023 number is 90.5%, which is quite high. 332 members and participants in our co-op, over 500 employees. There's still over 2,000 retail return locations in Oregon where consumers can return containers. That's in addition to 27 full service redemption centers and 99 Green Bag drop locations. Again, we'll talk a little bit about that program. We have 5 regional processing plants. Our largest is located with our headquarters building in Clackamas. And all of this is provided with zero taxpayer dollars. It's an industry responsibility system. And beverage distributors are proud to play the role and help this system be successful. I mentioned that we sort of think about kind of reform measures as 1.0 and 2.0, but the first change in the way that consumers could return containers occurred shortly after the co-op was formed. That's when the legislature allowed for full service redemption centers like our bottle drop redemption centers that you see here. Again, prior to this, the only return points available for consumers were retail stores. That was it. When the redemption center concept came into being, basically, if the distributor cooperative formed a redemption center in an area, then in a geographic circumference of up to 3.5 miles around that center, the consumer take back requirement at retailers decreased. So if you're within the first mile-ish perimeter, there's no take back requirement for those retailers. If you're between a mile and the edge of the second convenience zone, it reduces from 144 per person per day down to 24 per person per day. In exchange, consumers can go to these facilities and they're open 7 days a week. They can return up to 350 containers per person per day. So there's an increase in the number of containers that they can return. And then each of our bottle drop redemption centers also came with the green bag program, which I keep describing, or keep talking about without describing. We're almost there. And we have 27 of these facilities now. Our largest center by volume, 122nd and Gleason in Portland, processes nearly 100 million containers a year. We think that makes it the busiest redemption center by volume in the world. And it has some pretty cool technology that we've deployed there to help facilitate an efficient return of containers for consumers at that location. The second sort of related intervention that occurred is the green bag program. So prior to the introduction of the green bag program, consumers would return containers either through a reverse vending machine, kind of one at a time, or a hand count at a grocery store or redemption center. The green bag program allows consumers to put all of their deposit material in the same bag, glass, plastic, metal, all goes into the same bag. You put a QR code sticker on the bag that associates those containers with your bottle drop account, and then you can drop it off at any of our full service redemption centers or retail drop locations. The containers are counted through an automated system that we developed in-house at OBRC. It uses artificial intelligence and a neural network to recognize the containers on a conveyor belt. It's a batch counting system. And to tabulate the material type, which we report to OLCC with our redemption data every year, and to count the containers for the consumer's refund. And so those funds load onto a bottle drop account, and then you can get cash. You can pull cash out of your bottle drop account anywhere that you can drop off your bags. And when you shop at participating retailers, predominantly Northwest Grocery Association members like Safeway, Albertsons, and Fred Meyer, they'll add an extra 20% to your funds if you choose to shop with store credit. So that's a very popular return pathway for consumers. There is no easier way to return beverage containers into any deposit system anywhere in the world than the Green Bag program in Oregon. And we've seen, again, the legislature expanded the way that program can be offered in the 2019 legislative session effective in 2020. And they said, okay, dealers, if you're not located, within the circumference, if you're not being served by a redemption center right now, but you want to decrease your individual container take back from 144 per person per day down to 24 per person per day, we'll let you do that if you receive these green bags from consumers. And so that grew a big network of return options at retail locations for consumers across the state, and has been a very popular return pathway.
Smart.
Yeah, I mean,
So where do the consumers get the bag? Sorry.
oh yeah, Chair Doherty, Commissioner John Porter, consumers can get the bags anywhere that they can drop the bags off. So at any of the redemption centers or retail. This is a New Seasons and Lads edition that you can see on the slide right here. In the center photo, we have our models demonstrating how you purchase the bag at the point of sale, but they're available on the store shelf, just like any consumer product, and their price, it's $2 for a box of 10. That helps make sure it's not just the cheapest garbage bag on the shelf. And the kiosk that you see on the left, consumers can access their accounts and print vouchers to get cash or store credit at that kiosk. We also have a mobile app, which you see in the next photo there, where you can see your balance and you can see when your bag's credit and the value that the bag's had. Access locations, change your account information, all sorts of convenient things with the mobile app. And then the bag drop locations themselves, again, this isn't the New Seasons, but they can be shipping containers kind of in the back of the parking lot. In many cases, stores built in Oregon after 1971 had kind of fixed areas for beverage container return. And so we've been able to remodel those into bag drop locations. And the sort of the data shows how popular this has been. That's another one that we did in St. Helens. We actually ran it off of solar to demonstrate that we could keep them resilient. It's been a real game changer. We have about just over 1 million bottle drop account holders today. That number has nearly doubled since I started at OBRC a little over 3 years ago. Consumers collectively return over 12 million bags a year. About 46% of container returns are coming back through the Green Bag program. You see some blue bags in that photo. That's actually the nonprofit component of the program. So it works the same as the Green Bag program, except the containers benefit a nonprofit fundraiser. We have 5,600 nonprofits in Oregon who are registered with Bottle Drop Give to raise funds through bottles and cans, and they collectively raise over $5 million a year. So it's an amazing part of the community fabric across the state. I jumped the shark a little bit on this one, but we're really proud of it's every town festival, school group, PTA across Oregon, and it's an awesome way for one, people to rally around the bottle bill and understand the value that it plays, but two, to provide another motivating factor for people to return containers. So, you know, the dime might not mean a lot to some individual out there, but if the PTA is handing out blue bags at the meeting, they're likely to fill one up and bring it back. So we're really proud of our Bottle Drop Give program. This slide sort of, I mean, in a single graphic demonstrates the change in the system over just even the last 13 years. So as recently as the orange shading on this slide are large grocery stores, the blue shading are convenience stores. And as recently as 2010, 100% of containers returned in Oregon were coming back as individual containers at grocery retail stores. The lion's share of those coming back through large retailers, about 10% coming back through convenience stores. And we were also only redeeming about 1 billion containers a year because this was pre-container expansion and the redemption rate was lower. You look at the Bottle Drop network starting to deploy in those early 2010s. And the impact that had. So the green shading represents the Bottle Drop network. And what you see now is that about 80% of containers returned in Oregon are coming back either through our Bottle Drop redemption centers or through the green and blue bag programs. About 20% of containers are coming back through grocery retailers, split evenly between large stores and convenience stores. So it's been a big shift. You also see even as recently since about 2016 to present, the number of containers in the system doubling. So from a volume perspective, we've been busy in terms of trying to build that network out and process that increased volume. This is a look at the Bottle Drop network kind of across Oregon. Again, I mentioned we're in nearly every community. We're continuing to expand drop locations, between a half dozen and a dozen locations a year. Our most recent full service redemption center build was in McMinnville. Prior to that, North Bend, Coos Bay, and we're able to open up a couple new areas there that has helped improve access. Can
we go back?
Yeah, you bet.
Yeah.
Yes, Commissioner.
So I think it's pretty cool. So I noticed that there were 6 processing plants, and is that specifically just for the nonprofits?
Chair Doherty, Commissioner Japong Porter, our processing plants serve 2 functions. So we run route operations out from each of our plants. And so they pick up containers from the grocery retailers that have taken containers back to consumers in that geographic area. And then they also process the green and blue bags. And so it's a combination of counting, sorting, and compacting material. So now we also have what we call high volume plant fundraisers. So you're correct that we have a program where in some cases there are community fundraisers that are really good at the Cannonball Drive. I mean, they're coming back in horse trailer sized volume in many cases. And so we register those groups and allow them to bring those containers directly to a processing plant instead of having to go through the bag program or anything like that. So we do have a high volume fundraising component.
So is there a list on your site of the nonprofits that you approve of?
Yeah, so any nonprofit's eligible and can sign up, and we have a searchable. If you go to bottledrop.com, we have a searchable queue. It's not, I don't think it's ever listed anywhere specifically, but you can search by keyword or community name and see the nonprofits that are available there. And if you're interested in the list, I can reach out.
That's kind of interesting.
Yeah. It's in our annual report, which you can find on our obrc.com site. We actually do list the 516 nonprofits that raised over $2,000 each in the past year. So we have kind of our wall of fame of nonprofit fundraisers in our annual report.
Thank you.
You bet. This is a kind of a display of where our bottle drop account holders are located. These used to be viewable sort of as purple dots on the map. Now they're kind of, blotches as saturation occurs. But I think if you took a satellite image of Oregon at night, this is where you would see illumination. We have bottle drop account holders just about everywhere that Oregonians live. We zoomed in on a neighborhood in Hillsborough, and so you can see sort of at the neighborhood level, the saturation of participation from consumers in the program. So really proud of really becoming a convenient, regular household program for many Oregonians. And Oregonians like our program. We do regular public opinion research with DHM Research. This is a poll from late last year. 86% of Oregonians report that they're familiar with our bottle bill system, and 93% of Oregonians agree with the statement that it is good for Oregon. We're really, really proud of this, and the commission should be really, really proud of this and the role that you play in helping this program be so successful and popular. The work that Jim does every day is a big, big deal, and he's been an excellent partner. The commission's been an excellent partner in this program.
We are very proud, but I feel like it's my son scored a touchdown. Look at me.
Yeah.
Good job. This is impressive. Thank you.
It is. Yeah. Thank you. And this, again, another display of kind of how successful it is. The national average container recycling number hovers around 35%. Our neighbors to the north, which is a fairly progressive state, Washington, where there's kind of a green recycling ethic that people tend to share. According to the Eunomia 50 States of Recycling report, they top out at around 30% beverage container recycling. And Oregon, again, leads the nation between 80 and 90% routinely. And we're very, very proud of that. Even among bottleable states, which you see pictured on the right there, we remain at the front of the pack. I did display out the difference we report to OLCC by material type. So the most commonly recycled commodity is aluminum, followed by plastic, and then glass lags behind a bit, but is still quite high. And then, bottle bills do two things that are really important. One, they improve the yield of material, so you get a lot more back, and they protect the quality of the material because it's not commingled with other recyclables and contaminants. It's just food grade packaging throughout the process. And that facilitates the best possible recycling outcomes. So all of our material is processed domestically in the United States. Our plastic is processed right here in Oregon at the ORPET facility. It's a wash and flake facility, so it grinds the plastic into the flakes that you see pictured there, and the end product is FDA food grade rPET flake, and goes back into high quality products again. All of our glass goes to the glass to glass facility by the Portland airport and is turned back into beverage glass again. So really proud of the closed loop in our glass. And all of our aluminum is processed at smelters domestically here, located predominantly in the Midwest and the South, and is turned into can sheet to become new cans again. So really, really good recycling outcomes from the program. And, again, that I just can't emphasize enough how much of a difference bottles make. They improve the yield dramatically, the difference between 30 or 35% and 80 to 90%. They protect the quality of the material, and they facilitate domestic recycling, which is very, very important. I'll pause there. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. Again, I would just echo that the role OLCC plays in this program is critical. To protect consumer access at literally thousands of locations requires a network of inspectors. It requires a manager who understands the system inside and out. And we greatly value this partnership, and we're thankful for the commission's work in helping the system be successful.
Chair, I just have a personal story. I love bubble bags. My family loves bubble bags. We live out in the country, so we're not close to a redemption center. So we sort of gather our bags, and you implemented a program where you can take, I think, 15 bags every quarter.
Yeah.
Which is phenomenal. It's really great. And then we've also used it as a tool for chores for our child. So she gets to take back all the bags. She has her own account, and she's racked up dollars.
That's amazing.
Great program.
Chair, Commissioner Warren. So I mentioned the regular public opinion research that we do with DHM. In one of our previous surveys, we really tried to gauge into people's motivation to participate in the program. And we found that one of the chief motivations for consumers in Oregon to participate is to teach their kids about recycling. So if you go to our YouTube page and find Seamus Gets a Fish, we actually created video content around using the bottle bill as a way to teach people's children about recycling and the value that it plays.
Great. Great job.
Sure, I have a question. So I've never used the green bags, Eric, and my family has we live in Salem, and
Yeah.
Salem has a really good just curbside containers. Would you prefer that we use the green bag rather than just put them in the recycled red box? And how do those get recycled?
Yeah, Chair Doherty, Director Prince. Yes, we would absolutely prefer that you redeem your container. I think, curbside recycling is critically important. It's a very, very important component of the overall recycling system. The best way to protect the quality of your material is to redeem your beverage container and get your dime back. If you do recycle at curbside, if you get an opportunity to go through a material recovery facility, they're pretty impressive in terms of the breadth and depth of these operations, but they have equipment that will do its best to sort out the materials by commodity type and compact them and sell them to market. But they're probably not going to be at the same bale quality that you're going to see bottle bill material be. So that the chance that it would be downcycled increases.
Okay. Well,
I can get
All
you,
right.
I'll get you a good blue bag fundraiser. Next week.
make the big shit.
All right.
Another question. Can you, what is the structure of OBRC? Is it a nonprofit? Is it a for-profit? Tell me a little bit about how that operates.
Yeah, Chair Doherty, we're a cooperative in statute. So we're formed like the Tillamook Dairy Association or Oregon Country Natural Beef, where a group of private industry partners will join together for a stated purpose. In their case, the stated purpose is to jointly process and market their products. In our case, our joint purpose is to fulfill the stewardship responsibilities of beverage distributors under the bottle bill.
Very good. So will we be moving to wine bottles at some point?
Chair Doherty, that's an open question.
Okay.
It's a complicated question. The commission spoke to some of the retail return pain points that we've seen, I think, emerge. The retailers have expressed some concern about expansion right now from a container perspective. We're concerned at the co-op about what types of recycling output we might see in other material types. So we actually studied our data around larger glass containers that are already in our system. So there's some 40-ounce beer bottles, large kombucha bottles, sparkling ciders that are in the bottle bill right now. And we looked at the sales data and redemption data on those containers, and the redemption rate on that large glass is about 53%. The Recycling Modernization Act that Jim mentioned includes spirits and wine bottles right now, and it will go into effect in July of 2025. The Producer Responsibility Organization that will operate that system in Oregon just released their preliminary plan, and they anticipate that they'll recover around 53% of large glass bottles. So from an environmental outcome perspective, it might be a wash on the system that larger glass is currently in, and then where it is now. And then in the survey that I mentioned from late last year, we also asked consumers, do you consume wine at home? And of those consumers who do consume wine in the home, we asked them, what would you be likely to do with your wine bottles if wine were added to the bottle bill? And 55% of consumers said they would be likely to redeem their bottles, which sort of corroborates directly with what we see in our large glass recycling outcomes. So we're really focused on those outcomes and how consumers feel about the program. And then I think, again, trying to hear and listen to the feedback that we hear from other stakeholders in the system, like the grocery retailers.
Very good. I'm indeed proud now that I hear all of this. So great job. Commissioners, any other questions? Thank you. Oh,
I do,
yes,
Chair, if you don't mind.
Not at all.
First and foremost, thank you so much for the presentation. Kudos to OBRC, kudos to Oregon. What a great program and leading the pack nationally. Great job. Just a quick question. Do we have at all, do we know what the financial impact is for some of those bottles crossing state lines into Oregon? Do we have an idea what the
Yeah.
financial impact is?
Chair Doherty, Commissioner Floyd, you ask a very important question. I think that we have an idea of what that might be at scale. The containers themselves have uniform UPCs, so there's no way to, when you're just looking at a container, to tell if it originated in Washington or if it originated in Oregon. A couple things, in Oregon has this industry responsibility structure. And so it's beverage distributors that are responsible for providing and carrying out this program, which differentiates us from states like California that have a public program. So when container fraud occurs in California, that's a fraud against taxpayers. That's a public liability that's occurring. When containers cross the border in Oregon, that's a fraud against our distributor members, and it's a liability for them in their stewardship role over OBRC, but it's not an exposure to taxpayers. So that's an important component of the system. Now, because it represents a financial threat to our members and threatens the integrity of the program, we care a lot about it. So we have a well-staffed loss prevention department that tries to detect that activity. The daily limit at grocery retailers and redemption centers plays an important role because it decreases the motivating factor to try to do something like that at scale. But it is a really challenging piece. And Jim mentioned the statutory penalty for redeeming containers from out of state, but it's, from a legal perspective, it's really challenging. It's essentially a mens rea level of to cite, it's like a traffic citation. So to cite for it, the officer would need to see the person do it. And that's not just redeeming the container, but see them, bring them cross border. So there's some challenges in statute that should probably be tightened up at some point around that. But we work really hard to try to minimize that to the greatest extent possible.
Thank you for that. Eric and Jim, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you both.
Chair, if I just may say one last thing.
Sure.
Thank you, Eric, for that. It was a great presentation. And I just want to update the board that Eric will be leaving OBRC soon. And it's going to be a big loss for us here at the commission. But I just wanted to publicly recognize Eric for all of his service. And
Yeah,
Yeah.
Derek, we want to give you a challenge coin.
Oh,
Just to say thank you.
Commissioners, thank you. I'm returning home. I'm going back to the coast, and I'll be working at a power PUD there. It's been a career-long ambition to get back that way, and so I'm really excited about it. It's going to be hard to set the bottle bill stuff down. This is an iconic area of policy for Oregon. For a policy wonk in this lane, this is a real pleasure, and it's been an honor to work within the system for the last few years. But you're in good hands with Kim, and the OBRC announced my replacement is actually a veteran of the commission, Devin Morales, who was an employee here at OLCC for a good long time, and then has been working in the building as a lobbyist for several years. Will be joining OBRC in my role. So we're super excited to welcome Devin aboard.
Well, congratulations and thank you for all you've done for Oregon. It's impressive. Thank you.
thank you.
And welcome, Alicia. Glad you're here. We couldn't see you on there at the beginning, so we could acknowledge that she's also present. Next, we have the Colin. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning.
Good
Can I do,
morning.
Mr. Chair, can I do an intro?
Yes.
Before calling it started, I wanted for the new members, Michelle, I'm sorry, you tried to sneak in the back. So as Colin's doing our budget update, I wanted for all the commissioners, but the new ones, Michelle Deister is here, who's our legislative fiscal officer. So when Colin's talking about budget or I'm talking about budget, Michelle's the person we're in very good hands with who helps the Ways and Means Committee with our budget and staffs the subcommittees and all that. So I just wanted to recognize Michelle. Thanks for coming and hand it back to Colin. Michelle's one of Colin's key partners when we work with the legislature.
You're welcome, Michelle. Glad you're here. Thank you. Colin, take it away.
All right, thank you. Well, good morning, everyone. For the record, my name is Colin Nealand. I'm the Chief Financial Officer for the agency, and it's a pleasure to be speaking with you all today. And what I'm going to be doing today is I wanted to go over and provide a financial services update for the information that Director Prinz and I had updated the governor's office and the legislature with during this last legislative session. And also, of course, since we're a couple of months past February, there's a slightly updated information, including distilled spirit sales and case sales that we'll be presenting on today. So you'll get a little bit more of an update. And spoiler alert, we really aren't seeing any changes from what we presented back in February. So we'll talk more about those trends as we go forward here. And so without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started. So the first thing I wanted to share with everyone, and this actually is information that we have borrowed from the National Alcohol Beverage Control Association, also known as NABCA. And this is information they put together showing in the blue bar chart what spirit sales have looked like going back to 1999 and continuing through 2022. And then the yellow bar chart is wine sales over that same time frame. And even though we're missing 2023 in this data, what we really wanted to show for you is a couple of things. One, what NABCA is reporting is similar to what we have seen individually here in Oregon, and what we're hearing from the industry is that there has definitely been a history of growth here in distilled spirits and wine sales over time. But I'll draw your attention to the right side of this slide, where you see that as we head from 2021 into 2022, we actually see that there begins to be a trend downward in sales in both of these areas, both in distilled spirits and in wine. And that is also consistent with what we hear from the industry when we're speaking with them, and is consistent with what we're seeing in the financial information that we are experiencing as an agency as well, and ultimately in what we pass along to the state, general fund, cities, and counties. And so then to transition from that larger look that NABCA provided to show a look at liquor sales in dollars for what we have been experiencing. And this takes a look at the past 32 months. And so what we're talking about here is the state budgets every 2 years. The fiscal year for the state goes from July through June. And so this has a fiscal year starting in July of 2021. Continuing forward through June of 2022, which is fiscal year 2022, the blue bar chart that you see here. And then, of course, the same for fiscal year 2023. And then the gray bar chart reflects the first 8 months of this biennium, so going through February of 2024. And what we wanted to share with everyone is that when I had first started with the commission almost 2 years ago, at that time, there was a projection of almost 20% growth. I was sharing with the commission that was something we would be monitoring, because we had some questions on whether or not that growth would end up being realized. And as we've gone into this biennium and as we've been monitoring it over the last 8 months, what we've seen is that growth that was projected has not been realized. Instead, we're seeing exactly what NABCA has been talking about as well, is that we're really seeing liquor sales on the distilled spirit side really plateau at where they were in the last biennium. And you can really kind of see that activity, especially when you look at the gray bar chart, as you look at it month by month. An interesting thing that we see is actually fiscal year 2024 has been a little below the prior fiscal year activity, except for the month of February. So the month of February was the first month in this biennium that we saw revenues actually be slightly above what we had seen in that same time period in the 2 fiscal years before that. And then if we look at this information, not just from a dollars perspective, but also from the perspective of cases sold, we see the same type of information where we're seeing that in the fairly flat case sales perspective, but again, in fiscal year 2024, we're seeing case sales be even below a little bit what we had seen in the prior biennium, except for here in the month of February, where we were actually for the first time, again, above what we had done in the same time period in fiscal year 2023, but still slightly below what we had done in fiscal year 2022. And so this is something that we are continuing to monitor, and we'll continue to update the commission on a quarterly basis. And we'll continue to use this information as well as we look to project what revenues we anticipate will be coming in the 2025-27 biennium, because of course that's not only important for us as an agency, but it's important for the state and cities and counties and the revenue forecast that we provide for planning purposes for them as well. And then to kind of give you an idea, I know we've seen this before, but this is just a pie chart that really shows from an agency perspective on a gross sales, what is the percentage that distilled spirits provides to the agency and ultimately to the state. And then, of course, we have wine and beer in our privilege taxes, and then we have our license fees that you see. And so, you can definitely see that distilled spirits at over 90% of the revenues that come into the agency. That is definitely one that we're going to spend the majority of our time really focusing in on because that is the most material revenue item that we have as an agency. But, these other items that we look at are not insignificant at all. When you look at, anywhere from, 7 million to 18 million between medical marijuana and liquor license fees to 32 million in recreational marijuana license fees, and then roughly 40 million on a biennial basis from a privilege tax perspective. And the one thing I would note for the commission is these are projections, and this is something that we're going to continue to monitor because similar to what we're seeing on the distilled spirits side, privilege taxes is another area where potentially we're seeing a decline in activity. And if there's a decline in activity, often there's a decline in the amount of privilege taxes that will come into the agency. And privilege taxes, we actually distribute by statute 50% of the wine and beer taxes that we receive to mental health and drug services that we pass along to the Oregon Health Authority. So that's an aspect of where half of those revenues are directed from what we receive. And then the next slide that we wanted to show for you today is just an update of using this revenue update that we've done recently here in February and continuing to monitor what the distribution looks like. And again, of the distribution, and when we talk about the distribution, what we're talking about is we were just looking at gross sales of distilled spirits and alcohol revenues. And once we pay the costs of liquor and freight expenses and then agency expenses to run these programs, then the net we distribute to the state general fund, cities and counties, the Oregon Wine Board, and Mental Health and Drug Services, which is what you see here. And those percentages are set in statute. And so the general fund receives 56% of what that net amount would be. Cities combined 34%, and counties 10%. And so this is what we're currently projecting will be distributed by the end of this biennium. And of course, we'll continue to update this as we go. But this was based on our latest revenue forecast that we had shared with the legislature and the governor's office here during the February session. And then the other thing we wanted to talk about is obviously there's a lot of activity taking place in the agency with the investments that we're making in the liquor control model, the investments that we're making to modernize the agency and to become more efficient. And so one of the things we want to talk briefly with you about is just to give you some context for the work that we're doing, and also provide some information from a budget perspective and a warehouse capacity perspective. And so real quickly, just to give you some overview information here, we actually began as an agency, began working on this effort, predated Director Prinz and myself. The work here began back in 2019 to begin providing cost estimates and other information to the governor's office and the legislature on our warehouse, headquarters, and conveyor capital projects. And conveyor, we also use the term material handling system. We were definitely in need of a new warehouse, conveyor, and IT systems modernization because we're currently using 2 warehouses there in Milwaukee, obviously very old facilities, and these projects were approved both in the 2021 and 22 legislative sessions. And we really appreciated the governor and the legislature's support at the time to invest in our need to modernize, address our warehouse capacity, and meet future demand. And of course, meeting future demand is critical. When I'll show a slide here in a moment showing the capacity issues that we have in the warehouse today. And I'll give a shout out to Steve Robbins, our Distilled Spirits Division Director. He was able to put that information together for us. And it definitely really utilizes some information that Deloitte and Touche previously helped the agency take a look at. And it really highlights the fact that we really need to prepare for the future, given the warehouse capacity issues we have today, and really enable to really be positioned to fulfill our mission in the liquor control model for the state of Oregon. And so this is the slide that Steve Robbins and his team put together. And I know it's a little hard to read, and so my apologies for that. And I'll also talk about, this slide also demonstrates part of our IT system limitations, because our current systems, they actually couldn't go back a full 2 years, which is why when we were putting this information together for the legislative presentation back in February, we were not able to go back to January of 2022. Instead, we were only able to start in February of 2022 and provide that information going forward. So that is why on the left side of this chart, you don't see 2022 information. And I think that also demonstrates the challenges we have from an IT perspective when we struggle to go back even 2 years ago to get historical information and try to make, data-driven decisions. But what you can see here, of course, is that the 80%, which is kind of that orange to yellow line going across at about 500,000 cases across. And again, this was information that Deloitte and Touche helped the agency put together. And the challenge this highlights is that even though we have seasonality, where December is always a high month for us, and of course you also see that in the months leading up to December. But what the challenge we see here with our current warehouse capacity is that we're over that 80% best practice standard every single month. And this just really highlights the need of why we are moving forward and why we appreciate the governor and the legislature's support to really invest in a new warehouse in Canby and position the agency for the future.
Chair,
Commissioner?
I just asked a question. Where do we put our cases when we're at 100% of capacity? When we're over 100%.
Go ahead, Steve.
Hi, good morning, Chair Doherty, members of the commission. For the record, Steve Robbins, the Distilled Spirits Program Director. We stick it into nooks and crannies that are not normal locations. If you were to walk through our warehouse in December, we've got our forklifts and J pickers running around in aisles that normally should be open, both for OSHA standards and for the sake of just efficiently operating.
So it's a safety issue.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Right. And so then the other information we wanted to share with the commission was just going back and taking a look at what was the budget that was approved during the 2022 session related to our warehouse and material handling conveyor systems. And so you can see that between these two projects in Senate Bill 5702, the projects in total were about 145.5 million, but they're actually broken out into two separate approved projects. And so this will be important for us as we continue to move forward, because we can't move money between these two projects without the governor's office and the legislature's approval. And so this is something that obviously we'll be making sure that we're tracking appropriately as we're moving forward now that we have a signed construction management general contractor contract, and are also moving forward to amend that contract to add the material handling system to that with our vendor J.E. Dunn. And what you see on this table is actually reflective of the need that we have to go back, and if we see a need to move money between these projects, to get governor's office approval and legislative approval to do so. And that is exactly what we did during this last legislative session, is going back to 2022 in the February session, roughly 2 years ago. Cost estimates at that time were about $15 million for the material handling system. With updated cost estimates, inflation, and different items there, we were actually seeing those cost estimates as we refreshed them with our architects helping us design this system. They were coming in closer to $24 million. And so we worked with Michelle Deister and our other partners, and were able to get an approval to move $9 million from the warehouse project to the material handling system. We also worked with the governor's office and the legislature to update our warehouse project so that the headquarters was removed from the project, and instead plan to move headquarters to the Portland State Office Building, which will then lease that space from the Department of Administrative Services. And so this was all work that we had done. And of course, where we see is that we're at the beginning of the value engineering on the warehouse side of things with our vendor J.E. Dunn, and there's a lot more opportunities to work on that value engineering with the warehouse than there can be with the material handling system. And of course, looking to maintain the commitment as well, that we're not looking to an overall increase in the project, but instead to shift the money to where we were seeing the need for that within how these projects were formally budgeted in the state process. And then the other thing we wanted to share is we talk a lot about our warehouse and our material handling system projects, but we also have an IT modernization project that was approved during the 2021 session. It was approved for $27 million. And we've been moving forward on that project. That is where our cannabis alcohol management program, also known as CAMP, or if anyone ever sees an old acronym, you may see that project referred to as MLLC, which was Marijuana Liquor Licensing Compliance. But we had updated that name as an agency to CAMP, and just wanted to provide a breakdown of where the budget in that 27 million was, both for the cannabis alcohol management program, but then also something that we're working through the procurement process right now is for our distilled spirit supply chain at 16.5 million. And then the professional services make up the balance of that 27 million in approved bonding that we have. And these are projects that we expect to complete in the 25-27 biennium as we're moving forward in tandem to have the new warehouse built. And this also speaks, of course, to a lot of the work that the incredible people that we have here at the agency are doing, because, in addition to the work that our teams do every day just to keep the lights on and do everything that we normally do day in and day out, we've also asked them to take on a lot of agency projects between the warehouse, between the material handling system, between these IT modernization projects. And then in addition to these items, we also, of course, have had the Oregon Privilege Tax Online project that we've been working through in financial services that went back several years ago to when the legislature had approved a bill to move our paper-based privilege tax system to an online system. And then, of course, what become their own projects as well is planning to actually move our headquarters to the Portland State Office Building and move ourselves as well from a warehouse perspective to Canby. And these are things that we're doing all the while that we're currently working on putting together our agency request budget for the 2025-7 biennium. And this is a diagram that I borrow from the DAS Chief Financial Office. And you all have seen it before. It just has the dates updated. And the reason I like this diagram is I like the fact that it really is in a circle, because what it really reflects is that the budgeting process and the planning process for the next biennium in all reality never stops. Pretty much by the time we're exiting the legislative session in this last case from 2023, we're pretty much jumping into, putting that budget into motion with all of our divisions and then stepping into planning efforts for the next 2-year cycle. And so that's something that we're working on at this moment right now in earnest, and working with the governor's office on that. And we will actually be formally submitting our agency request budget for the 25-27 biennium. And we'll be submitting that on August 1st to the governor's office. But all of our numbers have to be in the budget system a month before that. So a lot of work that the agency is going through all at the same time while we go through all of these things. And we appreciate the commission's support. And we wouldn't be able to do this without you. And so I really just wanted to stop there and see if I can answer any questions for the commission today.
Commissioners? Okay. Colin, thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Very clear. Steve, you're up. A warehouse update.
Thank you, Chair Doherty. Members of the commission, again, for the record, Steve Robbins, the Distilled Spirits Program Director. You have endured for months pictures my stick figure drawings of the warehouse. So I am excited to start sharing with you some of the schematic design issues for our warehouse and talk about a little bit where we are in the process. Before I actually put those pictures up, I did want to update you on a few other things that are happening around the project. We met with the neighborhood group in Canby last week to talk through their issues. One of our subcontractors, who's an engineering firm, presented to them some of these schematic designs you're going to see today. And it just gave the community an opportunity to ask questions, express concerns. Fortunately, that went very well. Nothing came out of that was a surprise to OLCC. There are, some questions around truck traffic and where that truck traffic will flow in the community. There are questions about trees on the property and how close they are to the cemetery that is actually on the property. And just a number of things that were not a surprise, but that went very well. And it was just a good chance to talk to the community a little bit about that. There were also questions about the fact that Walnut Street is one of the roads that our warehouse is on, and they're building an extension for Walnut Street through to 99 for truck traffic. That has not started yet, but they're very close to that process. We don't own or control that process at all, so those questions were sort of deferred, but they're just very interested in where those trucks are going to sit and will they be idling at night and things like that are legitimate questions, and we walked through those things with them. So that went very well last week. The other thing too, I had made a commitment when I joined OLCC that our warehouse staff are definitely impacted by this project. And at the time, we hadn't really talked to them very much about what was going on. So we held a meeting quite a few months ago with them to talk about the specifics of what's happening, to show them what we were thinking about and start to get input. At that point, we were pretty early in the process, and then we've had this stretch of some contract negotiations going on. So it was time to revisit this with them. So I met with the warehouse staff at a shift change this last week on Friday. actually showed them again the schematic design pictures we're going to take a look at. It was a really good conversation because it allowed them to come, we had it up on a big screen and they were able to come and really look at the details. And we got some fantastic conversation and some things that they brought up that were great ideas, and we're directly incorporating those into the design of the warehouse. So it's been very good to get their perspective because they're the ones who are actually operating equipment in this facility and have some ideas around how we're structuring that. So that was something that went very well. What I'm going to do now is share the actual design.
Steve, can I hold you for a sec?
Yeah.
And I don't know if you're going to cover this later, but Commissioner Glenn asked a question about the capacity and what we're doing with all of that. And are you going to be talking about that later, or mostly on the design? Because I want to just ask one question on that.
Sure, Doherty, I wasn't, but I'm happy to talk about that.
Well, just a quick question. And one is, who's responsible for that inventory and managing that inventory? I think it's not us, it's our suppliers. Is that true? Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, sure, Doherty. Not to get into all the details, but the inventory in our warehouse is in what we call bailment. It's in bailment agreements where we don't own that inventory. It's owned by the suppliers. We work closely with them depending on the volume and the turns of that property to make sure we have the right amount in the warehouse. So when we're over capacity, one of the first things we look at is, do we have too much of a product based on the kind of turns we're getting out of that product? And we have been working with some of those suppliers to start to reduce those numbers down a little bit to help us with some of that. But they have sort of their view, they'll be able to extract data from us, see sort of where volumes are, they know what their turns are. And so they're involved, but we're also involved, obviously, because it's on site in our facility. And just as an aside, Chair Doherty, those are all bailment agreements are the arrangement, the legal arrangements around that. And those bailment agreements had not been updated in a long time. And we're in the process of working with the Department of Justice to update those bailment agreements. And we're working with NABCA. Colin had spoken about the industry organization. They see lots of bailment agreements around the country and provide feedback to those of us that are members. And so we've got that with them right now. And they're looking at our bailment agreements, in which case then we'll come back and be sharing that with the 800 folks that we have bailment agreements with right now. Sometimes when you change bailment agreements, that puts ripples of fear out there into the industry. We've been putting people's minds at ease that nothing in our bailment agreement changes are substantive in terms of content. It's much more around format and the templating and getting it more in line with Oregon's how we want Oregon's contracts to look. So there really isn't anything substantive we're changing there in bailment.
Yeah, my concern was that, and I think you've answered the question, we could ask them to take some stuff out if they're over it, because we're a free place for them to store their stuff. Yeah, if I'm reading this correctly. Yeah.
Yes, sure, Doherty, that is correct. It is also one of the things we're excited about when it comes to the new warehouse is the fact that we'll have the capacity to be able to expand stock keeping units or SKUs. So we'll be able to expand variety. We'll be able to move into some areas right now where suppliers are very interested in us moving into, but we just can't right now. And as soon as we have the space, that's going to provide us the opportunity to do that. And, it's still going to be important for us to focus on having the proper inventory in the facility. Just because we're going to have a huge new building doesn't mean all of a sudden we want everybody to load up inventory in the new space. But for us, it's just going to provide us a lot more flexibility, and we're excited about that.
Well, thank you for that, and then pardon me interrupting your flow here.
Not a problem at all. So, okay, let's take a look here. I know these are small, but I'm going to speak to them in general. You've seen chicken scratch versions of this before, but this is the 33-acre parcel in Canby. In this picture, there are really two sections here. The section on the left that is sort of white colored is optional. It's basically an optional parcel. We're not going to be building on that 8 acres. We're not going to develop it all. If you were to stand looking at this picture at the top of this picture and look down, it's a 30-foot difference in terms of elevation. And so for us to develop this would take a lot of land movement and having to redo a lot of things. We don't need the space right now. And so we're going to leave it undeveloped. That doesn't mean we're going to let it grow wild. We want to maintain good relationships with the community. So we need to keep it maintained. But for right now, we're not going to develop that portion of the property. There has been some discussion about, obviously during construction where we're building on site walls and tilt up walls, we may use that space as we need it, but we're not going to actually develop it at this time. The right side of this picture is the actual developed portion of the property. You'll see that there is our 350,000 square foot warehouse that is there in the white with the diagonal lines. And you'll see two little boxes to the left of that are green with diagonal lines. Those are both two planned expansions for the future if we need them. So we wanted to make sure that in the plans, we did say if we're going to need to increase the size of this in 50,000 foot increments, we will move to the left of this picture and expand to the left. But initially, that will not be there. This picture shows that we will run truck traffic. If I can get my cursor to work up there, but truck traffic will come in this entrance here. We will have a guard shack. Our current facilities right now are not secure. In the new facility, we will run traffic in and out of the warehouse through a guard shack. And so no one's getting trucks in or out of there without us running it through security. All of those trucks will run to the bottom of this picture, which is where our shipping and receiving is. So the bottom of this picture, the warehouse, is our inbound and our outbound areas. This section here is outbound, and this over here is inbound. We've got additional trailer parking that will be down here. And again, I just want to state, this is not final. We're in the process called schematic design, which is where we're giving basically where everything's going to go. We will then transfer into design development where we get into the detail of where all the outlets are and everything in the building and get a lot more detail. Right now, the plan is for trucks to run both in and out through the guard shack. There is a driveway you'll see on the right side of this picture. That's primarily for fire code. And in the future, depending on how we structure our transportation network, we may allow some trucks to go out that way. All of our employee parking is up here at the top. I mentioned that there is a cemetery on site. That's the cemetery right there that we're talking about. And so what I'll do now is move kind of to a picture of just what's inside the warehouse itself. And let's see here. All right, so this is a picture of the warehouse itself inside. And we'll drill down into each of these sections a little bit just to give you some perspective on it. I mentioned that the parking lot was up here. This is the main sort of the front office section for the facility. We will have a very light HR contingent in the building. We'll have IT folks that will need to be there to run the systems in the building and keep them running. And then the folks that are in the distilled spirits division that work with claims and inventory control and some of those things could be up in that section as well. On the right side of it, we'll talk about it later, but it's where the locker rooms for employees are, break rooms, things like that. If you look to the left of that, over here is all of our maintenance systems, pump houses, all of that, car bays, where we work on forklifts, things like that will all be up in this area. Down here, and then to the left of that is what we call a rework area. We deal with claims in the warehouse where bottles break and it's messy. You got liquid and broken glass. So we need a place to do that specifically. That rework section makes sense to be up in that corner of the facility. Down here, and again, we'll drill down on it. This is what we're calling the warehouse office right now. This is where labels will be printed, where our lead workers will work, where it's the brains of running the conveyance system and the actual picking and operations of the warehouse down there. It will also be a place, because transportation will all be coming in that part of the building, for a trucker's lounge, for a place for folks who come into the warehouse and do the physical loading in our trailers. We'll have a place to put their coat and do those things that we don't have any of that right now. So we're excited to provide a little bit of better working environment for our partners as well as we do that. And then it's really light. And again, remember, this is schematic design, but they wanted, the architects wanted to just reflect that this warehouse is going to have a lot of racking, a lot of what we call a material handling system, which is racking, and then the conveyance system itself. And that conveyance system, if you haven't had a chance to see it here, we'd be happy to show you the one we have. But really what it allows us to do is pick onto a belt in batches, and then that system will automatically parse stuff out to the right doors so that it's then loaded into trailers. It makes things significantly more efficient for us, and it allows us to keep track of product while it's in the conveyance system as well as the warehouse management system. It's going to be very different than what we have now, though, because right now all of our pick modules are one level on the ground. You can't see it in this picture, but these are 4-level pick modules. So each of these pick modules will be 4 stories, and it will allow us to have employees on all 4 stories picking. They will come down, run kind of like a drive or an exit down to the actual conveyance system and out to doors there. This picture right here is demonstrating where we would be at full capacity. So this has got 14 outbound doors with conveyance running to it. Well, currently we're operating 4. We do not need, when we open this facility, to have 14 doors functioning with our conveyance system. We haven't decided exactly how many that will be. Colin mentioned earlier that we're working with the contractor on the material handling system. Those things will be finalized over the next few months as to how many doors will be operating on the first day, but it's expandable very easily to go to 14 outbound doors. We're just not at a need for that right now. Okay, so again, really small drawings on a screen, but this is that front office area that we talked about. So everybody who comes into this facility, other than the trucking and transportation folks, will come in through the front door here. We'll have a little entryway. The left side of this hallway over here is where I talked about HR and IT, and some of my folks will be here. We'll have conference rooms here. Over here is where the locker rooms will be, shower rooms for employees, some other wellness rooms that we're required to have. That we're excited because there'll be training up here, a training room. This will be a dividable wall that will allow us to open that training room to an even bigger space where our break room is for something that is, even a statewide OLCC meeting that we need to hold somewhere. This will give us the capacity to do that. And then down here are where the refrigerators and sinks and microwaves are for those break rooms. So folks will come in, they'll do what they're going to do in terms of changing for work, and then they'll come out into the warehouse there. I just wanted to show you these. These are even smaller, but this is the process we've been going through. We've been doing workshops with the architects to talk through options. So this is just an example of the multiple options for how we would lay out the break rooms and the showers and that side of the facility. And so we had these options here. We've chosen option 3, but I just wanted to show you from a process perspective, we're seeing lots of multiple options against portions of the warehouse, and then we're making decisions and picking. And these are the kinds of things where it's great to have our employees' feedback because they're the ones that will be using this space on a regular basis. I mentioned to you in the top left of that picture, it was in blue, the maintenance areas. This is again, those maintenance areas with car bays. We have maintenance for the warehouse and the conveyance system. We have maintenance for the facility itself for HVAC systems. We'll have an on-site generator that's up here that will help us in the event that power goes out. And then the warehouse office over here. I'm going to go ahead and try, if I can, to zoom in a little bit just so you can see that a little bit better. But it gives you a feel here for the fact that drivers will come in through this area. This whole thing may change significantly because as it was originally designed, you'll see that this hallway comes in and everybody comes into the warehouse through this door. But the fact of the matter is all the work those people will be doing is on the opposite side of this, on the outbound side of the warehouse. So we're flip-flopping some of this to try and allow those folks to go straight out. But this is where we'll print the labels. We'll have computer systems set up for employees as needed, office space for our managers in the warehouse and shift managers, our lead workers who are dealing with inventory control and scheduling could be here. And then again, this is the truckers lounge and area for lockers or cubby holes and restrooms as well. So let's see here, we'll move to the next one. Just to give you a picture of the exterior of the facility. This is just a rendering of that. You'll see that's the employee parking lot there. That lower dark colored section, that is the front entrance and the front office area. It will be outside the tilt-up walls. In discussions with the engineers and architects, they felt that that made more sense. We can have much cleaner access to HVAC systems and everything on that roof right there, as well as it just some of the limitations with tilt-up walls. Anytime we've got things, we have to put windows and doors and openings in those big walls. It just makes it more complicated. It's easier to have all that extra light and everything for the office space as not part of the actual structure of the warehouse itself. You'll see a big kind of a black square on the top. We do intend to have solar that will really help augment the facility. And so that's just representing the fact that we'll have a field of solar panels on the roof itself. You'll see that the cemetery is over here in this section. There are trees all the way around it. And I mentioned in our main neighborhood meeting that one of the things that the church is asking for is the removal of those trees. Believe it or not, that's unusual. Usually it's fighting to keep trees, but in this case, over many, many years, literally centuries, those trees are actually growing into the property, and that's causing problems in the cemetery. So they're asking if we can remove those. We have not committed to doing that yet, but we're in the process of talking that through and seeing what the implications of that are. So that's really sort of our first foray into schematic design. We're really excited because we're really getting into the nuts and bolts of things now. As this progresses forward, once we finalize this, which really will happen in the next couple of weeks, that will allow us then to move on and into the actual final scheduling. How are we going to schedule this out? What is the guaranteed maximum price for this project? Right now, everything's in estimates. They wanted a schematic design so they can really start to nail that down. So we're getting close now to where we're really going to be able to start to see the fruits of our labor, understand price, understand schedule. As it stands right now, we're shooting for the very beginning of 2026 to occupy this warehouse. And there are conversations right now about when do we break ground, when we actually start to level ground. I anticipate that will happen before the end of this year for sure.
Here.
Commissioner?
Steve, thank you so much for that presentation. That's wonderful. Is it possible to go back to the first picture of the build site? You talked about the 8 acres that is a future possibility and the grade level of that as it stands now. Is there an opportunity to grade that into the capacity of the project so that in the future, as you develop it, there's less cost? Because trucking off a lot of that dirt is extremely expensive.
Yes, Chair Doherty, Commissioner Warren, the reason that we're not looking at that space right now is because it's not even in the 40-year development plan at this point. And so for us to even move land, even while we're in the process of moving other land, we're not certain what the disposition of that property will even be within the next 40 years. So that's why we decided to we'll just hold off on that a little bit. We're having conversations now about the fact that I don't reflect it here, but this is actually 3 parcels on this. We're reparceling that right now, and we are likely to incorporate some of this conversation we're having here into this in terms of how we go forward with it. How easy is it for us to develop that in the future versus not, or whatever means we may be dispose of the property, whatever. So at this point, all of our plans, even out 40 years, can be dealt with just the expansion of the warehouse as shown here.
Commissioners, anything else? Steve, thank you. That was very good. That's very excited.
Thank you.
Get more excited all the time. So we're going to take a recess now. The commission will temporarily recess its public meeting to discuss proposed stipulated settlement agreements from contested cases under ORS 183.417 and as authorized under ORS 192.6901. We'll be back in a bit.
Hold on. There we go. I think we're good.
We good to go? Okay.
Good
Oh,
morning,
okay.
good morning,
Good
Chair. Good
morning.
morning, Commissioners. For the record, my name is Victoria Brown and I'm the case presenter with the Administrative Hearings Division. I have before you 4 alcohol.
Commissioners,
Chair,
questions?
questions?
No questions? Is there anything you want to talk about here?
No, thank you, Chair.
Chair,
Commissioner?
I move to ratify the 4 stipulated settlement agreements as proposed by staff.
Been moved and second. Any discussion? Take the roll.
Commissioner Chowry,
Yes.
Commissioner Curran.
Yes.
Commissioner Floyd,
Yes.
Commissioner Glenn,
Yes.
Commissioner Japon Porter.
Yes.
Commissioner Hayes,
Yes.
Commissioner Melatus,
Yes.
Commissioner Warren, Chair Doherty.
Yes. Also, we have the next one is the marijuana violation stipulated settlement agreements. Any discussion? I'm going to entertain a motion.
Move to ratify the 2 stipulated settlement agreements as proposed by staff.
Second.
Been moved and second. Any other discussion? Can we have the roll, please?
Commissioner Chowry,
Yes.
Commissioner Curran, Commissioner Floyd,
Yes.
Commissioner Glenn,
Yes.
Commissioner Japon Porter, Commissioner Hayes,
Yes.
Commissioner Melatus,
Yes.
Commissioner Warren,
Yes.
Chair Doherty.
Yes.
Thank you, Victoria.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have to. We have to, use that for the rules or just, okay. Next, we have rules, initial action regarding the marijuana bill and the technical package. And would entertain a motion there as well. Oh, I didn't see you guys there. I'm so sorry.
Look out, real life is boring.
All right, well, bring us up to date on the rules.
Good morning, Chair Doherty and Commissioners. For the record, my name is Nicole Blase, and I am the Rules Coordinator for the OLCC. I am here to present 3 rulemaking actions for your consideration today. And I believe before I get started, our Public Records Manager, Brent Haley, would like to make a few comments.
Sure. Good morning, Commissioners, Chair Doherty. Just for an overview of what we're doing today, there's 3 packages Nicole said. We have initial action on 2 legislative pieces and technical. And just to give context of why we're doing these is, the legislative session recently closed. That gives us some homework to do over the summer so we can get things implemented on timeline. Some of these packages will be parted out and we'll do specific advisory committees with industry and public health partners to work through the rulemaking throughout the summer, late spring now. Let's not jump ahead too far. But we like doing this long runway just to allow ourselves to have time to really think through these issues in a thoughtful way and work with our partners that I mentioned before. So those are the 2 initial actions before you. And that's why we're here today. So they are a bit broad, but we'll be more granular throughout the summer with specific issues so we can focus.
All right, I'll go ahead and get started. Our first item for today is an initial action for the 2024 marijuana bill and technical package. The Oregon Legislature passed House Bill 4121 during the 2024 Oregon legislative session, which has several provisions that require agency rulemaking to implement. Further, the agency must also undertake rulemaking to respond to changes within the industry. The topics which require OLCC rulemaking are presumptive marijuana testing methodology related to ODA regulation of hemp growers, standards for artificially derived cannabinoids, I can never say that word, artificially derived cannabinoids in the general market, hemp product registration and labeling requirements, marijuana license caps and moratorium, hemp minor D court operations, and temporary worker permits. In order to address these issues and respond to other issues within the regulated marketplace, staff plans to hold several focused advisory committee meetings with the industry and our public health partners to develop the rules. This work may require commission staff to separate this rules package into smaller rule actions. Staff will update commissioners as the rulemaking proceeds throughout 2024. And we have staff here to answer any questions.
Commissioners?
Chair,
Commissioner?
regarding the 2024 marijuana bill and technical package, I move to initiate rulemaking to amend divisions 25 and 26 and to hold a rulemaking hearing at staff's discretion.
Any discussion? Second? We have a second, okay. Any discussion? We can take the roll, please.
Commissioner Chari,
Yes.
Commissioner Curran,
Yes.
Commissioner Floyd,
Yes.
Commissioner Glenn,
Yes.
Commissioner Japon Porter, Commissioner Hayes,
Yes.
Commissioner Melides,
Yes.
Commissioner Warren,
Yes.
Chair Doherty.
Yes.
All right, excellent. Our next item is an initial action for the alcohol bill and camp implementation. The Oregon Legislature passed House Bill 4138 during the 2024 Oregon legislative session, which has several provisions that require agency rulemaking to implement. At the same time, the Cannabis and Alcohol Management Program, also known as CAMP, is being configured for alcohol licensing and service permits, with planned launch dates of August 12th, 2024 for alcohol licensing and January 8th, 2025 for service permits. Further, the agency must also undertake rulemaking to respond to changes within the industry. The topics which require OLCC rulemaking are alcohol licensing service permit requirements, alcohol licensing service permit designee implementation, temporary service permit implementation, server education as a barrier to temporary service permit issuance, and service permit renewals. In order to address these issues and respond to other issues within the regulated marketplace, staff plans to hold several focused advisory committee meetings with industry and public health partners to develop the rules. This work may require commission staff to separate this rules package into smaller rule actions. Staff will update the commissioners as the rulemaking proceeds throughout 2024. Staff is here to answer any questions.
Questions? Would entertain a motion?
Chair,
Commissioner?
I move to initiate rulemaking to amend divisions 5, 6, and 9 and to hold a rulemaking hearing at staff's discretion.
For a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Okay, have a roll, please.
Commissioner Chari,
Yes.
Commissioner Curran,
Yes.
Commissioner Floyd,
Yes.
Commissioner Glenn,
Yes.
Commissioner Japon Porter,
Yes.
Commissioner Hayes,
Yes.
Commissioner Melides,
Yes.
Commissioner Warren,
Yes.
Chair Doherty.
Yes.
Excellent. And last but not least, our last item for today is final action for the batch tagging date and rule alignment rules package. ORS 475C.177 mandates that the OLCC develop and maintain a system for ensuring an accurate accounting of the production of marijuana items and the propagation of immature marijuana plants and the production of marijuana by a marijuana producer. As the industry has progressed, licensees and the legislature have asked the commission to lighten the burden of individually tagged marijuana plants. In response, the commission adopted rules enabling licensees to batch tag marijuana plants in March of 2023 with an effective date of January 1st, 2024. However, the OLCC encountered procurement delays, which impeded the implementation of batch plant tagging within the cannabis tracking system, also known as CTS. Due to these delays, the system was not ready for batch tagging by the effective date of January 1st, 2024. In December of 2023, the commission adopted the rules within this package through temporary rulemaking to align all of the policy decisions made over the course of 2023. At that time, staff delayed the implementation of batch tagging until April of 2024 to ensure system functionality aligned with the rules. Further, those temporary rules aligned all of the policy changes and technical adjustments that staff had previously carried through the rulemaking process. Commission staff have worked with the CTS vendor and listened to the feedback from the industry to further hone these rules. The CTS system will allow licensees to batch tag plants starting on June 17th, 2024. And I have TJ Sheehy here to answer any of your questions.
Commissioners.
The biggest, sorry.
No.
The biggest one, can you kind of explain a little bit about the outdoor harvest that seemed to be the bulk of the comments for this?
Sure. So for the record, TJ Sheehy, Director of Analytics and Research, and one of the programs in my purview is the cannabis tracking system. So I was asked to give some context and comments because this has been a long winding road, and we obviously have several new commissioners who haven't been there since the beginning. So to Commissioner Melias, your direct question, we did make a change in the rules that are before you now compared to the rules as initially proposed. A lot of the comments that we received during the public comment period were because of this June 17th date, our rules require plants to be tagged when they hit, as of right now, when they hit 36 inches tall. And for outdoor growers, the June timeframe is kind of right when they're on the cusp of that on either side. And so what we did is in this rule that's before you now, we made an allowance for outdoor growers, and then for mixed growers using their outdoor canopy, they'll be able to wait until June 17th to tag their plants as long as they're not flowering, regardless of height. So that means that even if a plant goes to 37, 38, 39 inches tall, they can wait until June 17th to use the batch tags on those plants so that they can realize those benefits. So briefly casting a broader gaze, I just want to make some remarks of how we got here and what this rule does and why we're proposing it. So first, what is Metrc and why are we talking about it? Metrc is our cannabis tracking system that under Oregon statute, we're required to have and licensees are required to use. The reason we have one and the reason that most adult use states have a cannabis tracking system is because cannabis is unique in that it's state legal, federally illegal. And from the beginning, the federal government has wanted to make sure that there's no leakage out of our system and things like that. So the cannabis tracking system is a core tenet of that. In our system in Metrc, products are accounted for through RFID tags, single-use plastic tags. And the ones we're talking about here are plant tags. Those are 45 cents per plant, and they have to be attached as of right now to every individual plant that's growing at a producer facility. Over the last several years, there's been a lot of concerns raised around the cost of that. So one, the material, they're 45 cents that licensees have to buy from Metrc. Second is the labor. It's a lot to attach all those plants, maintain all those plants. And then the last is environmental cost. As I mentioned, there's single-use plastic tags. And so we took it upon ourselves based on the concerns to proactively undertake this through rule to address those concerns. And so that's what we're proposing today. There's been a lot of concern expressed in the public comment period about where we landed. And so I want to give some overview of why we are where we are in terms of this specific framework. So this is a system change in Metrc, and we're mid-contract. So any system change would have had to be done one of two ways, either an amendment to the contract with mutually agreeable terms between the two parties, or wait until a new RFP and a new system. In the interest of time and realizing the benefits for licensees now, rather than waiting, we pursued the amendment process. And so the tag cost structure under the rules as they'll exist on June 17th
is that the cost for plant tags is going to remain the same. So the material cost is going to be net neutral. And that's the same model that Maine, the only other state that's adopted plant tagging, batch tagging is also doing. But we will allow the licensees to realize the savings on labor and on the environmental cost. Far fewer tags will need to be used because we'll allow plants to be tagged up to as many as 100 plants together under one single RFID tag. So even though that cost for the tag will be the same, those other cost savings will be able to be realized. And why we're keeping the material cost the same is because we are a fee-funded program. Like I said, we had to come to mutually agreeable terms with the contract holder. And so we had to find a way to keep the revenue for the program net neutral. And if we didn't do it through the tags, which is the primary way that licensees are paid metric currently, we would have had to absorb those costs on our books. But because we're fee-funded, ultimately that still would have been borne by licensees. And so because these tags are paid for by licensees based on the number of plants they have, that scales with business size and revenue. If we did it through fees, it would be a much more inequitable way of doing it because we would have a fee that even though it could be, like we have now, somewhat based on grow size, it wouldn't scale in the same way that tag costs do. And so we have smaller operators effectively subsidizing larger operators. And so this is a more equitable way of doing that. As I said, this rule does reflect the comments that we heard in the public comment period around those plant height issues. And so we're really trying to transition this as seamlessly as possible so that our licensees can realize these benefits as soon as possible and make it as workable as possible. In the public comment period, there were also a lot of comments about why do we need metric at all, or the future of tracking, those sorts of things. Predicting the future is obviously very difficult, especially in cannabis. We don't know what the federal landscape is going to look like even by the end of this year. And so I will say that this is something that we monitor actively. We're very involved in CANRA, the Cannabis Regulators Association. I actually co-lead the group of states, the users of metric at the national level. And so these are conversations that we have every single month. And so we're monitoring those developments, and as things change, as we're showing today, we are able and willing to respond to those changes through rulemaking and dialogue on these things. I think that's all I have, unless there's any other questions.
Any questions?
Well, it's a complex issue, and
Yeah.
thank you for everything, for getting this as far as we reasonably could, mid-contract, and it was complex. It was not easy to keep on track. I mean, that's one thing you didn't mention, how hard everybody on all sides of this had to work to keep this on track in the midst of everything going on. Yeah, I think it's good that the industry's comments are public so that, both sides can listen to the concerns, because, we can share them, but we're ultimately listening to the concerns of the industry and trying to maintain our regulatory responsibilities while, accommodating the industry. So it's good that everybody can hear those things. So good work. Very hard project to make everybody happy on, but you did a good job.
Yeah, thank you both, Nicole and TJ. You guys are a gem to us, and I know across the country you are so highly respected. We're doing good for Oregon and for the country in this issue. So thanks very much.
Chair Doherty, I will need a motion for a vote, please.
Okay.
Chair, I move to amend OAR 845-025-105, 845-025-2770, 845-025-7520, 845-025-7570, and 845-025-7580, effective April 19th, 2024.
Good job. Do we have a second?
Second.
We moved and second. Any further discussion? Take the roll, please.
Commissioner Chowry,
Yes.
Commissioner Curran.
Yes.
Commissioner Floyd,
Yes.
Commissioner Glenn,
Yes.
Commissioner Japon Porter,
Yeah.
Commissioner Hayes,
Yes.
Commissioner Melidas,
Yes.
Commissioner Warren,
Yes.
Chair Doherty.
Yes. Before we close this, is that your first motion? Jim?
Yes.
You took the toughest one.
I was gonna say, who's gonna argue about
Good
the bill
job.
and technical later this year that has about 100 rules listed?
We are adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Appreciate
everyone.
it. I wouldn't have picked that one.